All right, welcome everyone. It's been a month since we last met. We skipped the last one because of ETH Denver. So great to see everyone here again. We have quite a few agenda items today, so I'll try to move through them quickly. There's a lot of updates, and we'll pause at the end of each section to update. And yes, feedback well received that we should be uploading these to YouTube more often. We have some missing videos that have just been lying on my disk that I need to pull up from my old laptop. So we will try to catch back up to all of those, and we will try to be more diligent about this going forward, because I know this time doesn't work for everyone to dial in. Cool. So, quick overview, three sections. We'll talk about crypto, social protocol. This is kind of how we organize our team and also how we think about the different sections of priorities. Crypto is largely focused on frames, wallet, developer experience, and making it easy for people to do things on chain and for developers to build on chain experiences. Social is focused on everything else, which is how do we onboard users, how do we bring more people into Farcaster, and how do we get more people casting, liking, reacting, sending direct messages. And then finally, protocol is sort of the underlying building block of like how does Snapchain work, how do all of these, how do the contracts work and all of this stuff. So let me go through wallet. Biggest focus for the team right now is growing wallet usage and improving security. So on the usage side, we're running a lot of experiments to fund wallets. You've seen us do the convert warps to USDC balance, which lets people take all the warps, take a large portion of the warps they have and turn it into wallet balances so that they can use it in frames. We're going to run some more experiments where we're going to nudge like quality users to deposit and do like a PayPal style. If you put in $5, we will match you with $5 type things. And just in general, encourage people to have some amount of funds on the wallet. So when an interesting frame launches, they have something to be able to interact with and spend it in that frame. So we're going to run a bunch more of these experiments. We've got up to about 60,000 funded wallets on the ecosystem today, and we're going to try to get that number closer to getting to a point where all active users on Farcaster are able to use this. There's a couple of questions. Let me try to process them quickly. Will there be USDC gas payments? So long-term, the plan is once Spectra, the new Spectra hard fork launches and we're able to switch to smart wallets, we'll be able to do like things like gas sponsorship, which eliminate this problem entirely. What we're doing right now and what we've done is we've actually done growth campaigns where we encouraged people to get at least 0.03 or 0.003 ETH on base so that there's actually ETH in everyone's wallet to fund, and we'll likely keep doing more of that. So we're going to nudge more and more people to make sure that they have an ETH balance, which is the short-term fix. And then the longer term fixes will actually have some version of gas sponsorship and TBD, like who sponsored the gas and how to do it. Maybe Warpcast does some of it. Maybe frame developers can do some. But that is, I think, the longer term unlock is like users never have to think about gas. They can kind of pay for it in whatever currency they have.
We also support gasless swaps. So the idea is if you do have USDC, you can swap in, and we could improve the UX there, but it's probably a minor improvement for right now.
Yeah. One thing to touch on warps, I made a post yesterday or a couple of days ago talking about how we are thinking about warps in general. So quick history on warps for folks who've been on Farcaster more recently. Originally, we launched warps when L2s were starting to proliferate and people had no balances across different L2s. And so for doing something as simple as like, I want to mint on Zora and I have ETH on mainnet, it was like this very expensive operation. So we came up with a system where you could buy warps, which were sort of this like in-app system. And then whenever you wanted to do something on chain, 10 warps would effectively equal to $1, and then you could go and do things on chain for that amount. And that actually had this really, really nice UX where you could go do things on Zora chain, on Base chain, and a bunch of different apps. As the blockchains have gotten better, cheaper, cross-chain has gotten better, it's becoming more and more obvious that the long-term, the like 3 to 5 year view is that moving funds across chains is going to be very cheap and seamless, and all of that will be magical and happen. We're not quite there yet today, but we think that in the future, we can just, everything we charge on warps, we can just charge natively in USDC. Gas sponsorship will work magically. No matter which chain you have your funds on, we can just pull that and use that seamlessly. We're not quite there yet. So our current thinking is warps will help hold us over for the next, I don't know, call it 1 to 3 years to do on-chain things like adding signers, buying channels, and some like in Warpcast specific actions. And then in the long term, all of those things will switch to just on-chain payments like USDC and other things. And that's why we're starting to do this cash out with warps, which is a temporary way to say, hey, if you have more warps than you need, you can actually switch some of them out to USDC, and you can still keep using warps for buying invites, for adding signers, for buying channels. And over time, those will switch to more crypto native form of payments, but that may be 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years. Really depends on how the cross-chain infra develops and improves. Okay, cool. On that note, moving on to the next things. The other experiment that we're running is helping developers reach users with airdrops. So high level, one of the things that airdrops are powerful for is attention. When you like share funds with users or share assets with users, they get excited, they want to learn more about the token. That's interesting at a high level. The experiment that we're trying to run, and Dan and Linda are running point on this, is working with specific teams that have frames or apps or things that they want users to do and say like, hey, let us help you identify the most interesting users on Farcaster who are not already users of your app or channel or follow your account. If you're willing to airdrop some amount of your asset to them, can we actually get them to do something that is useful for you? Whether it's trying out your frame for the first time, whether it's following your channel, whether it's participating in your community. So it's a much more involved experiment where we're running this with a few teams. If you know someone who's interested in this, or if you're interested in doing this for a token that you own or a frame that you've built, reach out to Dan, Linda, or myself, and we can help prioritize and make that happen. Dan or Linda, anything you'll want to add on that? Okay, next note on security. So the other big priority for us is continuing to improve security. So we have a audit scheduled for the mobile wallet that we've launched at the end of this month. We're going to go pretty deep into it, probably ship some security fixes and improvements as we go through and understand the risk model of our wallet more deeply. And we'll continue doing these audits on a regular cadence, especially as wallets get more used and the balance and usage of wallets keeps increasing. We're also going to launch a formal bug bounty program at some point this month or next month, where there'll actually be rewards for people finding and reporting bugs. That's going to be another vector for white hat folks to go and poke at it and find bugs and earn for helping discover issues on the wallet side of things. Last item, we're getting to a point where like the wallet feature set is feeling stable, and we are now in like more like bug fixes mode and shifting our attention to the next major priority. And for us, that's frames. We haven't been able to give frames as much love as they've needed for the last 2 months because we've really been focused on the wallet. Now that that's in a good place, energy is going to shift to frames and really making that a much, much better developer experience. I put out a cast a couple of days ago, got a lot of great feedback. Auth was pretty high on the list of things that were frustrating for developers. There's a bunch of other features and user requests that we've seen as well. So team is going to go heads down and prioritize this and start shipping a lot of improvements for developers and users of frames starting next week. If you have any feedback, feel free to post it in chat here, or you can respond to my cast, DM me, whatever it is. We'll synthesize all of this and really prioritize making frames a great experience. All of those ideas are on the table for us to prioritize. Those are all things we've wanted to fix and have sort of been like little pieces of tech debt. Sorry, to reiterate Samuel's question, does that mean we will get the unified triggers like cast actions, merging V1, V2 frames, one-shot actions? These are all things we've been like wanting to clean up for a little bit and just haven't had the time to do it. We're now going to step back and think about how do we actually make this simple for developers and have like one sort of shift towards a simple, easy standard to use. Cool. Any questions on crypto before we jump into social? Okay. Social, the main focus has been like running a bunch of different rewards programs to incentivize things that help Farcaster grow, and also to make it easier for people contributing useful things to Farcaster to earn for their time and energy spent on the platform. So we have 3 programs today: rewards program for casters, rewards program for frame developers, and rewards for inviting other people to the platform. Caster rewards, I think, are our oldest program, and they're actually at a point where they feel pretty mature and are working well. I think we've hit a good balance of rewarding new users but then also making it so that existing users with large audiences can still win. And it feels like the game is actually at a point where it feels good and dialed in, and we'll continue increasing the rewards that go into this every month. There still have been some minor gaming. I'm sure some of you saw the John Galt account a couple of weeks ago, which was like an interesting vector for driving up engagement. Basically, there were a couple of accounts. The core problem was we didn't have any cap on the number of casts that qualified. That was a change we made recently. And so the vector for gaming was put out a huge number of casts and get a small handful of like neutral plus users to just engage on every single one of them, and that would boost it in the rankings. So we made some changes where we capped the number of casts that qualify. So now it's like your 20 best casts from the week. And if you make 2,000 casts, we're still going to just pick the 20 best ones to see what that qualifies for. And we'll keep dialing in like little things like that. I'm sure there'll be like ways to game it, but overall, it feels like the system is working well. The second thing is Frame Developer Rewards. This is a new program. We just launched it a week ago. It's in the second week. So we think it's working reasonably well. So we're upping the amount of rewards. So we're going from $1,000 a week last week to $2,000 a week this week. And we're going to continue upping the pool as we feel like the right types of frames and developers are getting rewarded. The one broader shift that we're going to push, I think we're excited about encouraging more frames that do on-chain stuff. And so the initial V1 was like kind of an equal split between, hey, is this just an app people open and are people doing things on chain? The thing that we are going to shift towards is we're going to weight on-chain actions more and more heavily, because that's kind of what sets frames apart and makes them really, really unique. And that's the one experience you can get on Farcaster that you can't get anywhere else. So we're going to dial in more rewards to frames that are driving transactions, on-chain actions, and other things on the protocol. So this week we tweaked the algo slightly. We have like a weighting factor that was like, for every app open, you get a point. For every transaction you do, you get a point. For how big the transaction is, you get another point. And we've kind of cranked up the points on the transactions a little bit, and we'll continue doing that over the course of the weeks to like incentivize frame devs and make sure that frame devs get good feedback to the leaderboard, so they're kind of looking at it. But the rough mental model is, if you're generating on-chain transactions, the number of transactions and then the value of those transactions are the two factors that get put together. And so as you drive more and more of that, you will move higher up on the leaderboard. Couple of questions. Other than the leaderboard, are there any plans to publish data about on-chain actions from frames, example, dollars generated, number of transactions, most users? Not immediately, like not something that we're doing this week, but all of the data is pretty open. Daniel on the team is actually going to publish the primary address spec. We're going to talk about that a little later, but it's now going to be possible to find all the users' addresses, all the Warplet addresses pretty easily, and anyone can just take this and put it into Dune and build their own dashboard. So it's going to be like pretty transparent way for people to find all the stuff that is going on chain. That is broadly for users, specifically for like what frame is driving what action. That's also possible, but it's maybe a little bit more schlepping and not as easy in Dune. So we might share some of that data over time. And yeah, Linda has a good point here, which is the other thing that we're doing is we're working on frame discovery. So we're going to have like a frame leaderboard that right now is mostly targeted at developers, but we're actually going to make this user facing. And so the way it's going to work is there's going to be the same algo that works for rewards is going to drive your position in terms of, do you show up on the page of 10 frames that we recommend to users? And so again, the more transactions and more on-chain stuff you do, the higher you'll be on that leaderboard, and the more likely that we will promote you to a user on the platform. And so switching to algorithmic is going to make this easier, because right now we have this manual page where we add people, and making it automatic means that like developers can sort of like, if your frame is doing well, you'll automatically get more distribution. Nice to have feature requests. See your place on the frame leaderboard, even if you're not in the top 25. That's a good suggestion. I'll pass it on to Gabriel, who's been working on this. And then also another ask for countdown. That's another great suggestion. So right now the rewards happen. Cast rewards are on Tuesday. Invite rewards are Wednesday. Developer rewards are Wednesday, and invite rewards are Thursday. Okay. The last program, which is the invite rewards, I think this one is going okay, not particularly great. And I think we see a decent number of like good users inviting people and getting rewards, but we also see a lot of like borderline spammy accounts that are trying to do invite bring farming, and it's kind of hard to distinguish between and eliminate those using the algos that we have. So this is one that we're kind of have on ice a little bit, and we're going to run the program as is, but we're not scaling it up or increasing rewards. We're going to try tweaking this algo a little bit and try to see where we can get this before we start scaling up rewards. So caster rewards working really well. Frame dev rewards early, but working well. Invite rewards early, not working so great. We're going to iterate on that one a little bit. Cool. DC search. So other big feature that we're working on, Ashot, who joined us recently from Com, has been working on a bunch of stuff in DCs, but one of the most important user-facing things that's going to ship soon is going to be direct cast search. And so you're actually going to be able to search through all of your messages within direct cast, just like you can on any other messaging app. So hope we'll have that ready soon for you. Ashot, anything you wanted to add?
Not much, yeah. Should be out soon.
Cool. Okay, third big thing that the team's been working on, Woj and Goksu have been working on this, which is user verifications. So one of the things that we are trying to do at a high level is introduce. So the problem that we face is a new account signs up and we have to make a bunch of decisions like, do we give this account access to video? Do we give this account all these other things? And if we just turn that on for everyone by default in a network where there are a lot of spammers, it actually becomes hard to scale that and we have to impose a lot of limits, like we can't allow long videos. And this is really frustrating for new users when they come in who are good, high quality users who want those features. So the way we're solving this is with this system called verifications, where you can connect your phone number, you can connect your Twitter, and if we're able to get good signals, like your phone number is not a VoIP number, and your Twitter account has more than X followers, or is more than like a few years old, or has verified. Basically, if we're able to pull any of these signals, we can get you to a verification level, and there's sort of level 1 and level 2. And if you get to one of these levels, we immediately unlock features. So right now, the way to get access to video is you sign up, you have to make a few casts. The spam model runs on those casts and is like, okay, this seems like a good user. Now you have access to video. That could take many days before you get the casts. Tomorrow, how it's going to work is you sign up, you do a couple of quick things, and as soon as you're done with that, you're now in level 1 verified, and then boom, you have access to video. So users are going to be able to self-serve quickly and get to another level. And this data is going to be useful for a whole bunch of features across the product. It's also going to be useful for other developers, so we'll expose it as labels and make it easy for people to consume. We just shipped initial versions of this, so all new users are getting some form of like a verification screen. And yesterday we just shipped the verification for existing users to 1,000 early beta users just to see how it works and to dial in all the parameters. Like we have our model of like, oh, if you have this many followers on Twitter, you're a good user, but we might change that over time as we learn. So we're going to slowly roll that out to more and more users until we get to everyone. And we'll keep dialing in the algo. And at some point next week, I think we'll have a good, like, these are the bars for verification.
We also do wallet connection, right?
Yes.
Ethereum.
Will there be other ways of verification outside of Twitter? We're going to offer as many as we possibly can. The initial 3 that we're going to offer are phone number, Twitter, and on-chain balances. So that's if you already connected an account, it sort of qualifies. And each of those contribute different amounts to the number of points. Like if you have a Twitter account that was created last year that has 10 followers, even if you connect it, it's not going to give you a lot of points towards your verification score. And so your on-chain balance might matter more. These are the 3 we're starting with. And the reason we picked these 3 is they're 3 that most of our users have and are very easy to self-serve. But over time, we might add more things that maybe appeal to a smaller set of users, but are like much more high signal. Like, for example, one thing that would make sense at some point is if you have a WorldCoin verified or proof of human, that is actually super valuable. The reason we're not adding it today is that most of our users live in the US or Western Europe where there's very low WorldCoin penetration. And so nobody's actually able to go through that flow, but that might change over time and we might actually get proof of human. Cool. And just one thing to dial in, like we say proof of human, but like the verification system is not just a blind proof of human. It's actually proof of work in some sense of like, have you done work to build up reputation on other platforms? And there's an important and subtle distinction to that, which is that you're not just like a human that wants to sign up. You're a human that has actually built reputation on other platforms, whether it's by getting followers on Twitter, whether it's by getting funds in your on-chain wallet and things like that, that actually make you more likely to be a good and non-malicious user of a platform. So it's a little different from proof of human. I don't want to just reduce it to that, but it is something roughly like, is this a good person that we should turn on all the features in the app for? And if you are a developer, is this a person worth targeting to see if they would be a good user of your product? So it's a little more subtle than proof of human.
I think it's also worth pointing out a couple things. Like I have to repeat this all the time in the network. Just because you're a human doesn't mean you suddenly are like you can't have spammy behavior or bad behavior. It's like there are plenty of people who are actual humans who do that, and that's annoying to other users on the network. And just because you have like some strong, call it biometric version of proof of human, like you got an eyeball scan, doesn't also remove you from that. So I think what Varun said is important is like, think of it as proof of work, is like there is the more stuff you can connect to prove that like it took you time and like effort and reputation, that is a far more valuable signal for most use cases, especially on a social network, than just like a proof, like a strict like, yes, I am a biological human.
Yeah.
And obviously AI agents can be extremely useful and are going to have a hard time scanning an eyeball.
Yeah. There's a couple good ideas in the comments that we considered and we think we will add over time, just not in this initial version. So let me touch on that. First from Vripan is Coinbase attestations. So we thought about this. We like this idea. The reason we didn't ship it in V1, the one wrinkle is doing it on mobile is a little clunky because we can't do it like in the pop-up window. So the way it works is you have to go to a browser, you have to do it from Coinbase. Because they don't yet have a frame, you have to select a connected address that you have already connected on Warpcast. And if you haven't done that, you have to go do that first, and then you have to issue the attestation and do it. So it's a little bit of a clunky flow. We want to see if we can like build a frame or something that makes this a lot simpler so more people can go through it. And I think it's actually a really powerful signal, but it is something that we need a little more UX polished before we can expect most of our users to complete it. So we hopefully will be doing that soon. There's another thing on Face ID. I think that's like a little lighter weight. And again, to Dan's point, it tells us that someone is a human, but not that they've built a reputation. And so I don't know that we can just use a Face ID and say, hey, if you pass this, you get access to video. There's a lot of spammers that are humans sitting in front of phones that would actually pass Face ID. But we might be able to combo this with other things. And doing a Face ID might improve your score slightly. It just wasn't a single factor where if we're like, you have a Face ID, great, you immediately get video. Did not seem like the right trade-off.
Giuliano, I don't know if you've seen some of the videos though. There are some very interesting farms of like emulator devices where they've come up with ways to kind of like do this at scale. So I think, again, every one thing can be gamed, but if you take a web of trust, if you want to use an old school term, like that gets increasingly harder to game. And if this is all available on the protocol over time in terms of like public attestations, that allows anyone to kind of have a different model of like, what user do I actually want to trust or value?
Yep. Let me see if there's any other questions. What about a new account belonging to an old user? Cashless man, not sure I understood that. If you want to reframe the question, I'll take a stab at it. Domains from other platforms. Would you implement open trust protocols or create your own? So the vision for like how we're doing this is like we want to collect this information, and then for data that users want to make publicly available to other developers, we want to share that as well. So in most cases, the Twitter verification is public. You add it, it shows up on your profile, everybody can see it, and therefore you earn reputation. The phone number verification is obviously private. You don't want your phone number on your profile, and so we probably will not be publishing that info. But one of the things we'll do with verifications is like we'll try to make it so that people can opt into making certain things public versus not public. Like some users might want to actually show the country that they're from as without showing the whole phone number and be like, hey, I'm a resident of this place. Like now I'm eligible to use some services that operate in that country, etc. So we might selectively let people say, I'd like my country to be shared. I'd like this attestation to be public or private. And if it's public, it'll go down to Farcaster protocol. And if it's private, it'll stay on Warpcast and we'll keep it private. And right now, privacy is sort of a Warpcast trust assumption. Like you're trusting that we're going to keep this private for you. But I think there's a bunch of cool stuff like ZK Passport coming along where we don't actually hold any data and we just hold this like rough attestation for you. And that's like something we're excited about doing in the future.
I think one other point, like there's a zillion other versions of this online. Every single one of them that we've looked at assumes basically you're sitting at a computer on web with a connected wallet like in MetaMask or something like that. And I think our perspective is it needs to work on mobile and there can't be basically any dependencies. And so I think that the first couple of things that we've focused on doing is something that basically everyone can complete with just the app.
Yep. There's a question on what does private mean. So let me touch on that today with the two data points that we have, which is, or three data points we have, which is on-chain addresses, Twitter, and phone number. So on-chain addresses, when you verify them, they're verified and they're public. So users know that these are going to be connected publicly to their account. They're on the protocol. Any Frame developer who authenticates your ID can go pick up those addresses from the protocol and say, this is Dan, this is Dan's address. Twitter works the same way. It's public. We expect most people to want to be public with their Twitter, and the purpose of connecting it is to share it on your profile and get status. So that is also published to the protocol. Phone number, strong expectation of privacy. That will not be published to the protocol right now. That's going to be private in Warpcast. Warpcast will use it to raise its internal score, and we might make the output of that score public. So we'll say like, hey, this user has connected some set of all of these things and has gotten a score of level 1 or level 2. That data will be public, but the phone number itself will be, for obvious reasons, private and will not be published to the protocol.
Yeah, Varun said right now, there is never a version where we are going to publicly publish your phone number. I think we would potentially allow users to say, hey, I verified my phone number, or like to what he said before, the country, but that would be an opt-in. So very focused on strong expectation of privacy versus something that you effectively already have public.
Yeah, and the abstraction we want to present to Frame developers, the V1 abstraction is like, hey, let us calculate a level 1 versus level 2. So you can just make a judgment based on this and saying like, hey, this person has connected enough networks that they are qualified. But over time, we'll actually expose those subunits things as well. So you can say like, oh, this person has a verified phone and this person has a Twitter account, and you can make your own judgments of how you want to interpret that data. And again, users opt into making all of this public, right? There's never a time where we collect data or force people to do it. It's entirely optional for any user who wants to do it, but it will help people build reputation. It will make it more likely that app developers target them with airdrops, with other things. And so I expect that a lot of people will want to build that reputation. Is that going to be dumped in the score that is in the JSON that is uploaded to GitHub? We'll probably start a second label. So the current label on GitHub is purely like how interesting is the stuff you cast. Like it's not a proof of humanity, it's not anything else. It's literally like how likely are you to be an interesting user to follow? And this might be a second parallel label, which is how verifiable of an entity are you? Like how likely are you to be a person with real history on other social networks and other platforms? And so that'll be like a second label that will be in parallel. We still have to figure out what to call it, but you can use both of those labels. Like an app that is purely building for, I'm a social app trying to get users to post, cares deeply about the social label of like, are you an interesting caster? And then the app that is like, I'm just trying to target like real users might actually use this other label.
Yeah, Coinbase actually does this with their verification system. So they have, do you have a KYC Coinbase account, binary? And then what country? And like you can actually opt to choose which ones you publish to the EAS. So I think similarly for us is like labels should be composable, but the idea is like you may have a spam label or not likely to be spam that we're going to generate for everybody. But certain people who don't do verifications, we won't have labels for them.
Yep. All right, I'm going to move on to protocol if there's no other questions on the social side of things. Looks like there aren't. So, okay, cool. We already touched on the first topic, which is primary address verification. We ran into some technical issues with the FIP as currently implemented. Sanjay pointed out that actually doing the data as a byte on the verification itself is going to lead to some problems with the current CRDT model when messages come out of order. We can go into that in more detail if you like, but Daniel's working on a new version of it that is actually going to, we're going to actually start off just as a Warpcast API this week. We're going to get that out the door as quickly as possible. So developers have a way to quickly say, hey, I'll give you an FID or a set of FIDs. Tell me which address this user wants to opt into. And the way we'll do the preference is we are going to try to pick smart defaults. So your most recent, so the way the logic will work is as follows. If you have funded your Warplet, i.e. you have signaled sending money into the Warplet that this is an account that I have balance and I want to use, we will default to choosing your Warplet. If you don't have a Warplet or you have not funded your Warplet and is zero balance, we'll assume that that's not interesting to you, and we'll pick your most recently verified address and just assume whatever you connected last is the current one. And irrespective of what we do here, you as the user always have the option to go to settings and say, I would actually like to use this wallet as my primary wallet, and then everybody can target that. So we'll try to be smart so users don't have to do work. We'll just pick defaults, and then users can always go in and customize and get exactly everything that they want. There's one thing, would love a vanilla warplet address endpoint as well. The reason we haven't offered the warplet address endpoint is there are some users that just can't use the warplet for a variety of reasons, even if they've genuinely created one. And we don't want developers accidentally sending stuff to that wallet. So one might be like, hey, you're in a region we don't support. So even though there's like a wallet that we generated, we're not able to let you use this and you've decided to not use this. We don't want you to be like, oh, I'm just going to send you stuff there, even though you've opted to use something else. The other cases, the users just don't want to use Worklet. There's some small percentage of people that are like, nope, I always want to use Rainbow or MetaMask or whatever. And again, we think that like as a developer, you should respect user preferences in this case and not force the Worklet. But in most cases, we're going to default to the Worklet. So the rough model for developers is the only people whose primary address is not the Worklet are people who've gone out of their way to say, please do not send stuff to this Worklet. I can't use it or really don't want to use it. And we generally think people should respect that. I'm just looking at if there's any other questions here. Curious why this wouldn't just use the wallet the user chose as their preferred wallet on Warpcast. Dylan, I'm not sure if I misunderstand that. That is what we would do. It's like what you choose as your wallet. There's a little bit of subtlety here, which is there's like a primary verified address and a primary wallet. And so the primary verified address is I've proven that I own all these addresses, and this is the one that I would like you to use. And there's a preferred wallet, which is you can connect to a wallet from mobile to mobile. So you can like connect to Rainbow or connect to MetaMask, but you may not have verified this. So that is, it's a little bit of a technical limitation, but like if you have not verified it, we don't actually know that you own it. We just know that you connected it, but there's no provable way at the protocol level to say like Dylan actually owns this wallet. So that's a little bit of tech debt we have, and one of the problems of sort of supporting this multi-wallet thing. So it is possible to have a primary preferred address that is different from your preferred wallet because we can't actually peek in and see what your address is or prove what that is at any point in time. It's a little bit of a subtle point, and it's again one of those confusing wallet user experience things, which is why we think that like actually baking in a wallet into Warpcast, making this your preferred wallet, and trying to get as many people as possible to use this wallet, and having the wallet built into the social app is the right experience forward, and it's not the like connect to this other thing.
But we give the choice to users who want to use an existing wallet, and if they have their hardware wallet set up to that,
Yeah.
whatever the kind of choice is available.
Yep. Another thing, I think the wallet has increased the load time on the app a lot. We saw a bug like a couple of weeks ago where this was happening, and we believe we fixed it. Andre, if you're still seeing slower load times, let us know. We're happy to investigate. Most of this stuff should be loaded pretty lazily, and we expect there to be no time, but it's quite possible that we have a bug. Second question on is the inbuilt wallet custodial. So the wallet is user controlled, and we're working on a path to export your private keys or export your mnemonic so you can take it and plug it into whatever app you want. Due to a limitation on like the wallet provider, Privy in this case, they don't have a way to allow seed phrase export on mobile for security reasons. And we're actually going deep with them on that to try and understand to see if we sort of like agree and believe in that. But at the very least, we're going to allow you to export this on web. So you will have a way to be able to take your seed phrase and take it on web and go put it in another app. And today, obviously, if you don't want to use it while we're building out the seed phrase export, you're going to be able to just send the funds off to another wallet. And Tony's actually linked to the doc that goes through the architecture in a lot more detail about how exactly a wallet works, the trust assumptions that you're making, and how all those pieces work. Cool. Other updates, moving on to SnapChain. So SnapChain progress has actually been coming along really well. Huge shout out to Sanjay, Aditi, Cassie, who've been grinding on this. We're actually largely on schedule. So read notes have been out. They're getting stable this week. We found and patched a lot of the consensus bugs that we run into, and mainnet launch is targeted for next week. Again, we think this is largely non-interruptive. Mainnet will probably just sort of run in parallel and will cut over. So in the happy path, nobody needs to see anything or do anything for quite a while after the launch. But we are excited about the progress, and thank you to everybody who's been running a node and helping us test this. Cool. Moving on to the next item. So direct messaging, said we would have an update. Ashot has actually been working on this, and we are working on our first high-level version of the direct messaging protocol and how this will work. So Let me give you the tactical updates of what we're doing at this stage and then step back and explain the why. So what we're doing at this stage is we're working with two teams, Base, who's building the Farcaster app, and Zora, who's expressed like high level interest in this to explore what an integration would look like and get into the details. We have like a high level model of how this would work. We're going to share that more publicly soon once it's a little more polished. And we're going to work with two specific teams to like iron out the design and see if we can get it integrated and make it work. And so the shape of how this works will largely look like there is a DC server or system that is operated by the Farcaster protocol. And you can connect to that. And if you have an authorization message from the user, you as the application can pull messages on behalf of the user. So if Horsefax logs into your app and says, hey, I'd like you to be able to read my DCs, he signs a message from his wallet that's actually sent to the DC server and can pull the messages on your behalf. And that app can now send and receive messages on your behalf. Now, there's an obvious big security implication here. Think about if you're in a large group with like 100 different people, and one person in this group goes and adds an app that is either malicious or is just poorly built and ends up leaking all of the data because they don't store this data securely. Now, everybody's messages in that group are now publicly available and compromised. And this is just a fundamental challenge with multi-client direct messaging. We've never really had that at any scale before. Every large messaging app is single client for the most part. And so this is like a new vector that we need to be thoughtful about from a privacy angle as we are building this protocol. So the one big difference about the direct messaging protocol relative to the public messaging protocol is that the direct messaging protocol, at least to start, is going to be a white label system where we work with partners who we think have high degree of security and who we think are going to approach building this in a thoughtful and privacy preserving way and launch with them. And then over time, I think we can build in better and better systems to make this more and more available. But we think that this is going to take time. So V1 is going to be, you can get direct messages across multiple clients, but it's a work with us to get the integration done. And as we improve that, it will be something that will get 10 more and more permissionless over time. Couple of questions over here. Encrypted at rest. Yes, messages are encrypted at rest. We actually do client-side encryption. What's the problem? Can't you encrypt end-to-end? So the model to think about is encrypted end-to-end messaging doesn't actually help in this case because the client controls the device. So if you think that there's one malicious app somewhere that has built like a bad client, it can just suck up all the messages as it decrypts them on your client and render them. Because remember, the client is the thing that is doing the decryption for you and actually controls the displaying and rendering of those messages. And so what's going to happen is your trust assumption in a group is your level of security is equal to the worst security of any app that anyone in that group is using. And so unless you're willing to audit every single app and be like, hey, Dan is using these 5 apps, do I trust these apps? There is no way to know that if your messages are actually private or encrypted because one bad app can exfiltrate all of your encrypted messages. And so it doesn't matter what kind of encryption you do at that layer, the app has ultimate control, and that's actually what matters.
So just think about any app that you've ever given a signer to, or you have signers right now, and that app, like if they get popped and they don't even know about it, they now have full access to your entire messaging history. So that's not where we're not doing that.
Yeah. Can we document the security threat through group DCs on FIP? Yes, we're actually working through that right now. We actually want to take the approach of like trying to build a prototype and see how this works before we get too deep into the design, because I think there are a lot of like implementation constraints that are not obvious. So we'll try to get something done more quickly.
Can I just add one?
Sure.
Other? So one other thing that I think is really important, and this is actually something we've kind of talked through with the team, like Choate was driving this. So when we talk to actual users, and if you've been around on the protocol long enough, you've remembered we ran the first year and a half with a version of end-to-end encryption similar to Signal. The user experience people actually care about is Telegram, not Signal or even WhatsApp. Like it's like people in crypto use Telegram, and 99 point whatever % of Telegram chats are not end-to-end encrypted, right? So they have all of the UX benefits of not having that overhead. Now, is it possible to build something as good as Telegram and have the end-to-end encryption? Yes, but like I think in terms of like what we are primarily focused on is get this to the protocol in a way that developers can consume the APIs and then can build an equivalent experience, which is still a lot of work, to Telegram, right? So the ability to search, and all this other kind of stuff that you can do in multi-client world. If you don't have the constraint, which is a benefit, but it also is a major trade-off of a lot of this like hardcore end-to-end encryption, managing large groups. Like there's a lot of complexity that comes with that. And our biases opt for the thing that the users are actually asking for, which is UX of Telegram.
Yep. There's another question on, has the team ever considered a blockade for clients? I think it is technically possible, but it is a much harder problem because the exploits are invisible. The reason blockade kind of works is like when you miss something or you have a bad transaction, you can kind of see it on chain and everybody knows something bad happened. If there's a client that's silently slurping up all your encrypted messages, you just won't even know that it's happening. And so it's a much longer feedback loop cycle where exploits can happen and you just don't know about them. So it's harder to be more deterministic about that assessment with messages versus on-chain transactions that are public and the badness is visible as soon as it happens.
Think like Bybit hack of safe. Like it's just like you can just happen and then no one is actually noticing.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is, I think, just a fundamental problem that every public DC protocol will have to deal with, no matter what your level of encryption, no matter what fancy technology you do. The trustworthiness of the client that has access to your messages dictates whether your messages get leaked or not. And ultimately, you have to get to a point where where users can understand that trust assumption and that they're comfortable with that. Because the worst thing to do is to say everything is end-to-end encrypted and then allow anybody to add a client, and then all your messages are getting leaked. And so it is technically true, but the security risk is not what the user expected to be taking.
Monada does exist on the current Telegram APIs, and the only people who built any Telegram clients, like clients, not like bots, are Telegram, and then they have an internal competing team called Telegram X. So just like Signal is also open source and Telegram, there have been no other clients on either of those networks, despite them, like in theory, having that be available.
Yep. And this is just like a fundamental hard trust problem. I don't think there's a technical solution to it. It is a, how do you get users comfortable with the trust assumptions they're making? And the one option is the protocol will do that. The protocol will only approve trusted clients. And so therefore, you know that no matter who you're adding, they're adding a reasonably competent client. Or you can do the like hands off, we'll tell you which clients users are using, but you have to go audit and do the due diligence yourself. And so every time you join a group chat, you have to underwrite the security of everyone in that group chat.
By the way, Ethereum clients and like crypto wallets work because the implicit trust assumption is if you put your seed phrase into a compromised client, they're not slurping up data value, they're just going to steal your money. So like the evolutionary process happens a lot faster.
Yeah, there's a question of special signer type for messages. So that I think solves the problem for one-to-one for like your chat of like, who do I give access to my messages? But remember, the problem is the problem is like n-fold in a group chat, right? It's like, it doesn't matter who I gave access to. It matters who Dan gave access to because he's in that chat with me, or who Horsefax gave access to. And so you have to literally look through all of the authorizations that every single user has made. You have to know what the app is and you have to understand, is that app reasonable? Or you just have to assume that all your direct messages are public and they might be leaked constantly, which I think is just a fundamentally scary thing. Like people have some reasonable expectation of privacy, even if it's not perfectly end-to-end encrypted, they generally expect that their messages are not public or available to some malicious client. And that just becomes harder in this world where anyone in the group chat could have a bad client, and that one person having it compromises everyone's ability to remain private. Cool. It seems like an intractable problem. I think it is very tractable if you take a reasonable, like, trust-based approach and you say like, hey, the protocol will actually work with teams and say that like these are teams that have high quality integrations. These are the folks allowed to integrate with the DC server, and start with that reasonable approach. But this is not a thing that you can verify using some deterministic algorithm. It is a thing that you have to verify based on the caliber of the people building, the quality of their infrastructure, and, you know, frankly, their likelihood to be malicious or not malicious. Cool. I don't think whitelist is a good from Andre. I don't think whitelist is a good solution. Users need to do their research on the client. Web3 means permissionless. Also, presuming all messages can be leaked is a good security premise. I actually don't know, like, I don't think users use direct messaging protocols assuming all messages can be leaked. Like, I think there is a reasonable expectation of privacy. I think that, like, there's maybe a small 0.0001% of power users that have that assumption, but the average user has a reasonable expectation of privacy when they use most things. I also think it is just untenable to say every user has to do all their research, not just on the clients they use, but on the client that anyone anywhere in their group chat might be using, just not viable as a user experience. And so we want to make like trade-offs that actually lie between a good user experience and a decentralized option where you can switch between clients, but not something that is so onerous that nobody will be able to do it. And it's decentralized, but practically unusable.
I think that the other thing to really emphasize here is this is a crawl, walk, run approach. So the idea is like designing a system that is like completely open from day one with a high expectation of average user thinking about privacy because they don't even think about these trade-offs is like, that's just like bad user experience, right? Whereas if you start with today, it's one client has all these messages. We're moving to multiple clients. And then from multiple clients, as we learn and we can kind of figure out like what are the default patterns, we can work towards getting it to be any client, ideally could do it, and then have things be decentralized and then encrypted. But like trying to bite off a bunch of different things all at the same time is just like a recipe for failure versus like we're improving the quality of the system by going from one client to multiple clients, which is something that people have been asking for a while. And then we're going to learn from it and iterate.
Yep. Cool. I don't see any other questions. If I missed something, feel free to reping it in the chat. If not, I'll keep moving down the list. Three other sub items that we are still working on, or two other sub items that we're still working on. One is reducing sign up costs. Haven't made any additional progress on shipping it. We have a rough plan on how to do it, but we're waiting for Snapchain to land before we make any changes here. The second thing that we were blocked on here is improving our spam model before we reduce these costs, and that has actually improved significantly due to work that Akshan has done. So we're going to revisit this once Snapchain is out and stable, and we can start making tweaks there. Second thing is sign in with Farcaster Connect. No additional public progress at this time. We've been working with Base on like the implementation of this, and we've run into a bunch of like implementation questions, and we're going back and forth with them on like how do we solve X and Y. So we're exploring some minor tweaks to this model, but hopefully by the next meeting we should have an update on what we've landed on here. And I suspect it won't be dramatically different from the ideas that we've explored here. The one thing that we might shift is we're moving away from, I think, an idea that we explored here, which is the delegate signer model, to basically saying sign in with Farcaster is actually being used for important authentication. Like many apps actually are using your sign in with Farcaster to give you access to a wallet in their app. And so therefore we should treat this as very important to keep secure and not something lightweight. And actually a user controlled key that is signing something from a device they own is probably the right pattern versus delegating something to an app that can do things on your behalf. That's fine for posting messages, which I think is a reasonable model. Like, hey, here's an API key you can post on my behalf, which you give to Warpcast, you give to other apps. But I think here is a key that you can use to reach my wallet is not something that you should delegate to a server and should probably come from the user's device every time something needs to happen. So we'll probably lean more on EOAs in this version to drive that. But we're working through some of those implementation details with Base as they build their wallet. And we'll have another rev on the design by next week.
Let me just add a couple of other things. We're working pretty closely with a bunch of issues that I think have existed in the protocol for a while with Base. And as in doing so, I think we are going to get the protocol to a place where it'll actually be a lot more open for other clients. And like Base will basically have worked with us through a bunch of pain to like get to a place where it's like, okay, here is a clear pattern that if you want to actually build a client that's similar to Warpcast or Base or Coinbase wallet, you'll be able to do that. And you'll actually be able to do that pretty permissionlessly with maybe the module of direct messaging will be a kind of a allow list at least to start. But I think a lot of critiques around like, hey, the decentralization of some of these elements that have existed for a while, we're going to resolve with Base. And then I think that the only remaining issue would be probably like channel registration, which like, we could figure out something that could work there. But getting to a place where with Base, I think we're going to improve significantly the underlying decentralization of a lot of core protocol primitives.
Yeah.
And I think the second thing that we've had different ideas on how to do this in the past and other people in the community have. I think to emphasize Varun's point, one thing that's happened with Frames V2 and now because of Warplet is there's a lot more money tied to FIDs and kind of like Farcaster off. And I think that we have to like revisit some first principles assumptions that prior in the past, like with delegate signers and things like that, we were like, oh, the worst thing that could happen is someone, tweets out a like kind of, the wise key equivalent thing, which is still bad, but like, people who are savvy can be like, yeah, I'm not going to click that. You have like blockchain scanning and all this other kind of stuff. But in a world where funds are fundamentally starting to be tied to an FID, both in like forecasts, but also like privy wallets that are embedded in frames, like Ponder is a good example of that. Like we just have to fundamentally approach this from a first principles standpoint that like we actually are just at a different scale of like what decisions we need to make. And so I think that like people should just like approach it as like the reason we are revisiting some of these things and designing them the way they are is because funds are at stake and we want to be really thoughtful about that.
Cool. Andre says probably sign in with Farcaster should only be allowed if you have access to the private key of the custody key. That's effectively how we're thinking about this current model. And then on web, making it easy so you can proxy that. So like having nice info where if you try to do it on web, we already have this at a high level, but pushing it to your mobile so you can authorize it easily from mobile versus having to go pull this out, et cetera, et cetera. So that's generally the direction we're leaning towards. Because as to Dan's point, a lot of FIDs are being tied. The authorization for the FID is now being tied to funds.
And just like to emphasize, like a good example of where this creates a lot of user pain for power users is people who sit on desktop all day long and use Forecast, and then they like use Frame, and then they're like, this sucks, I have to open up my phone. That is like fundamentally rooted in the sense of like, well, there are actual frames that now have sensitive information tied to your FID. So you need to have that strong authentication and then now have funds within that frame. Yeah. And so like if I was to fast forward 6 months or 12 months, like we probably have some solution to solve for on web so that it is just as seamless as mobile. But I think like the first principles thing here is like nail off in a simple enough way and a secure enough way that no one feels like if they're interacting with the frame, they could suddenly be drained. And then I think that the second component of that is like make the system work for any other app in a very clear kind of way that is rooted in, I think, a very Ethereum-centric approach, right? It's like fundamentally, if you're signing from an Ethereum address, that is a strong form of auth.
Cool. I think we're a little over time, so we'll actually wrap here. If anyone has any questions that we did not get to, feel free to cast it at Dan or myself, and we're happy to answer it offline. Cool. Yeah. Sorry, just sorry, no, Dylan. I'll respond on Farcaster. You feel free to tag me, and we can do it there, I think. All right. Thanks everyone for coming today. And I will upload all the videos quickly.